Thanks for joining me on my next video. In this video I'm going to change the front engine mount on a 2007 Honda Accord V6 automatic transmission, and that's the mount right there. And I was starting to experience some weird rattling when I first would start the vehicle. As well, if I accelerated or came to a quick stop, I would notice some banging. So I'm going to share with you a video of me basically putting the car in drive, holding the brake, and revving the engine, and you'll see that the entire engine moves up too far, which is a good indication that the front mount is gone. So I'm going to replace this, and then I'll show you what the same behavior is after with the new mount. So I'm going to proceed to first jack up the engine a bit. Just hold it up with a jack and some 2x4, just to not put too much pressure on one part of the transmission or wherever I put the jack. And that'll keep it up, so that way it won't drop when I remove the bracket. And I'm going to remove these two bolts holding the upper bracket. There's a bolt right there. It's hard to point to. There's another one on this side. What I'll probably end up doing here, just give myself some room, is just remove the reservoir here, and that way I'll be able to access those bolts down there. So to remove the reservoir, there's a bolt over here. I'll try to see if I can focus in on that. Once you get that bolt removed, you'll be able to lift the reservoir up. I've already removed the tubing from the rad and the cover of the reservoir. So I'll tell you what size that is in a second. So I just removed the bracket and I was able to lift the reservoir out. This is a 10mm bolt, and it's just over here on the radiator fan cover here. Okay, so I'm going to loosen those two bolts or nuts and proceed to remove the top cover. So I've got the tranny supported with a jack, 3-ton jack with a piece of 2x10. I'll show you what it looks like from underneath. Okay. So what I actually did is put my car up on jacks on both sides, just so I can get room to put the jack in the front, because otherwise it's too low. And there's my jack with my 2x10 or 12, whatever that is, supporting the tranny. And I just lift it up just enough to release the pressure off the mount. One thing I like to do, make sure is always whenever I jack my cars, put my e-brake on, and I also put a brick in the back here just in case. Safety is paramount. Do whatever's necessary. Make sure you don't get hurt. So let's continue to remove these two nuts. I might put a little bit of penetrating oil on that and see how it goes. So that's a 17mm bolt or nut, and I've got a couple extensions, 1/2 inch, with a nice breaker bar, and it's hard to do with one hand, but I'm going to try to do this and break it. There you go. So I've got that loosened up. It's nice to have these long torque breaker bars. You can see how easy that was to loosen up. So I'm going to proceed to remove those two nuts off camera, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've removed the two nuts, the 17mm nuts, and now I'm able to just remove this bracket, put it aside. Okay, just make a note that the round part is towards the firewall and the flat part's towards the front of the car. Now that you've got that removed, next thing you want to do is remove this bolt here. That's a 16mm, and this is where it's actually connecting to the engine. So that's the bracket that mounts to the engine. That's also mounted to the engine mount. So once we have that removed, we'll be able to slide the engine mount out. And if I got my jack in the right spot, nothing should move. There wasn't much room to get my big sockets in here, so I just used a 3/8 socket, and it was quite hard to break the bolt, sorry. So what I ended up doing is basically just putting a piece of 2x4 up against here and banging it with a hammer, and I was able to break it free. So now it's loose, and I'll be able to remove this bolt. Okay, with that bolt removed, there's a total of 4 bolts. Sorry about that. There's a total of 4 bolts to remove. There's one on this side. Not sure if you can see it. Straight down that direction. And there's one just behind it as well. And then there's 2 on this side here. Hopefully you can see those. One over there, one over here. So we'll remove those. I'll tell you in a second what size those are, and I'll get back to you. Just want to make a quick correction. Earlier I stated that this was a 16 millimeter, this bolt here. That's incorrect. It's a 14 millimeter. And the bolts that are holding the engine mount, the front engine mount, are also 14 millimeter. They were quite hard to remove. I had to use my breaker bar, and the one in the back here, which is hard to see, that was quite challenging. Initially they broke quite easy, but as I was trying to unscrew them, they seemed to get harder and harder, which kind of had me worried. But if you look at the condition of these bolts, this is the one that was at the back. You can see it's quite rusted. It's hard to get a focus here. So I eventually got them off. So now what I'm going to do is try to move that bracket out and replace it with the new one. Now that I've got the 4 bolts removed, I was able to finagle that engine mount a little bit to the side. Also, if you haven't got the engine support lifted high enough, you may not be able to get that out. So I had to lift up on the jack just a bit more, just to make sure I had enough clearance. Then I was able to wiggle it out. One thing I do want to point out, the automatic transmission has a vacuum line connected to the bottom of the mount. Not sure if you could see that line down there, but there's a hose. It's hard to see from here, but there's a hose connecting to the bottom of the mount. I'll show you that later where it actually goes on the new mount. So here's a better view of the vacuum line going into the, so it's this line right here, going into the bottom of the front mount. I'll be honest with you, it's giving me a headache to try to remove. I put some penetrating oil, hopefully it'll loosen it. Worst case scenario, I might be able to remove it from this end here. It's also connected to a metal tube there. This part is rubber, so I'm going to fight with it for a little bit longer. First, I might have to remove this here as well just to try to get access to it because it's quite hard to remove. Hang tight. Okay, so I managed to get pliers in there and kind of yank on it and pull it, hoping I wouldn't rip the tube. And to my luck, I did not rip it. So here's the tube. And you can see where it plugs in at the bottom there of the mount. And I'll show you on the new mount as well where it goes. Okay, now let's proceed to remove that mount. So I ended up having to remove this cover here. Just got 2 plastic screws here. You just turned them and this comes off. There's a little clip here at the end. Unfortunately, as I was taking the front mount out, it kind of just popped out anyway, so just be careful with that. So with that out of the way, I was able to remove the mount. As you can see, the mount's gone. So here's the old mount. As you can see, it's totally gone. This is broken off, so it's a good indication that this was broken. This is no longer working, and hence why in that previous shot I showed you the engine moving quite a bit when I had it in drive and held the brake and put a little bit of gas. This did come with a rubber, and going to reuse this rubber on the new mount, so make sure that you use it. Put it back on, and this is the front where it says FR6. That's the front of it. So it's just going to go over the existing mount, like the new mount, like this. This is the old mount, but I'm just showing you on the existing mount because I had taken this off. So that's the rubber. So here's the new mount, and looks pretty similar to the existing one. As I said, we're going to reuse the rubber on this, so I'm just going to take it off the old mount, put it on. What I do want to show you is that connection where the tube goes. It's right there. That's where you connect the vacuum hose to the mount. This is a hydraulic mount, so that makes a big difference on how the car performs in terms of when you start it up, if it's going to shake at idle, and what have you. So it's important to reconnect that hose. I don't believe the manual transmissions have that, so it's important when you're ordering your part, you specify the correct vehicle specs. I just picked up this part from a buddy of mine who has a parts store. This is the front motor mount that I purchased from Westar, part number EM9247. Some folks were talking about how the part they got in terms of how it's welded. This seems to be okay. I'm not an expert welder, so I can't tell you whether or not this is good or not, but as you can see where it failed was the top here. So, and I'm finding these are a little bit longer, but these bolts are longer, but I don't think that's going to have any bearing on anything, so that should be fine. As long as the bolts, these are the 4 bolts I was telling you about. These are the 14 millimeter, and the one in the back, that was the one that was kind of hard to get to. I had one of these guys here on it at one point, and then I switched over to just a straight socket. These are 1/2 inch, and I had about 3 wobbles on it, so I put a small one in initially just so I can get the next one in because it had to come out, and then I put the long one in, and I used a breaker bar to remove the bolt. Like I said, it was quite tight throughout the whole process of removing the bolt. It didn't come out that easy, so thankfully it did come out and I didn't strip anything. So, all right, let's proceed to mount this. Okay, although I was able to get the old front mount out because the top part of it was actually disconnected, I found myself not having enough room to get the new one in, so I ended up removing the one fan on the radiator here, disconnected the top hose, plugged it up so I don't lose a lot of fluid, removed the battery and the box for the battery so that way I can get the fan out. Okay, so now that I've got room, I should be able to drop the front mount in and connect it. Pretty much have it mounted. I just need to torque it. I'll tell you what the torque specs are for those bolts. So one thing I ended up doing is from underneath the car, I actually put a little small piece of 2x4. Actually, I had cut the 2x4. I'll show you what it looks like. And just with a regular car jack, I kind of put it in there and kind of lifted this up a little bit. Just because I was only able to go so far with trying to lift the tranny. So I lifted it from this side here from underneath without damaging anything. And I was able to get this to go underneath because initially I was struggling to try to get it underneath. So once I got it in, I mounted this bolt. I have not torqued it yet. And then I proceeded to line up the other 4 bolts, and I've tightened those. I just got to torque them. And I did reconnect that vacuum hose from underneath. So let me see if I can get under there and show you what I'm doing. It became a bit of a mess as I'm working here, but so what I did, I got some antifreeze leak in here because I had to disconnect the hose. But what I did is I got underneath here. I don't know if I could show you. Right here. So at this point here, I put a piece of wood, which looks like this. It's a piece of 2x4 just stripped. And I put it in like that up against this piece here. And I just put my regular car jack that I have here. There's my car jack. That's kind of hard here. Sorry, I apologize for the angle here. So I had this in here. I had the car jack here. And basically I just lifted it up. So I got it up a little bit, enough to get that mount to go underneath the bracket. A bit challenging, and then I got the holes lined up and I was able to put the 4 screws in. So I may have ended up taking out more than what I need to, but I'm no pro, and I just did what I needed to do in order to get this this mount back in. So once I torque it, I'll torque this, I'll torque the other 4 bolts, I'll put the bracket back on, torque that if it has any torque specs with it, get my rad hose connected, put my fan back in, battery case and the battery back in, and top up my fluid, and hopefully that solves my issue with my motor mount. So once it's all done, I'll show you what it looks like, and I'll rev it while I have it in drive with the brake on and e-brake as well, and I'll show you the difference between before and after. Hang loose. So I have it mounted. The 4 bolts mounting the front mount to the frame is 40 pounds per foot, and the main bolt here, that was 47 foot-pounds. I couldn't find any torque specs on these, but I just hand tightened them quite a bit on the bracket here. So that's all put back together. As you can see, the rubber boots back on there, and I've lowered the vehicle in terms of removed the jack from the transmission there that was supporting the tranny, and so now I'm going to put back the one fan on the rad. As you can see, there's 4 screws here. These are just number 10s. There's 4 of them, and those are the ones I had removed. There's also the power going to the fan, so it clips into here and also clips into here, and then it connects to this connector over here, which then also clips into here. I don't know if I broke this or what. Looks like I may have broke it, so I don't know. We'll figure that out. And that's the cable that I'm talking about down there. As you can see, it's got, let me just remove this rag here, which is keeping the fluid from flying out of the hose. So as you can see, there's 2 clips on that. That clips into those 2 holes I mentioned here on the fan. So I'm going to put the fan back, put the battery back, give it a nice washing, just get rid of all that antifreeze that's spilled all over the place, and give this a try and see what happens. So I've got everything mounted back together, batteries back in, radiator fans back in, hose connected. I probably got to get some fluid to top up. I lost quite a bit. There's the new bracket. The cover's back on here. And I probably have to top up my power steering there. Anyways, I don't know what possesses me to do these things, because it just keeps me busy, I guess, and something to do. Anyways, car's what, 15 years old, going on 16 next year. If I can keep it for another year or 2, I'll be happy, and then that's about it. So let's start this baby up, and let's see what happens. So already I'm noticing a difference. I'm not hearing that knocking sound I was hearing earlier when I would start the car. Now I'm going to do the test. E-brake is on, brake is on. Hit the gas a little bit. A little bit more. Okay, very good. See? It's not moving as much as it was. One more time. Perfect. Thank you very much.